manufacturer, weapon type, caliber, model, batch description, batch name, and comments.
So we are compliant with the restrictions that Congress has set forth, but Congressman, these background checks that we conduct are done in homicide investigations where time matters and lives matter, and we are going to use the allowable things that we can do to try and help local law enforcement to catch killers.
You said that ATF processes tens of millions of records per year. And in 2021, ATF told Congress they had over 920 million out-of-business records, including both digital and paper records. So has ATF's out-of-business record gun registry surpassed 1 billion records total?
I don't know. I know that last year, the paper records we received were something like 70 million, and I'm not quite sure of the exact number. There are a tremendous amount of records that we receive, and we are doing our best. Some of them are stored in boxes that sit on the side, and we run into those boxes where there's an investigation and try to help our local law enforcement partners. We're doing our best.
But with all of this information that you're gathering that is searchable, that is enough for you to create a list of every, for example...
it's not.
Well, it is.
Every single firearms dealer that's currently in business, every single one, we don't have any records.
You have the ability to create a registry, for example, of AR-15s and create an enforcement list of his new ban on pistol brace weapons, correct?
I disagree.
Well, I think the evidence is clear that you have that ability. Even if you say you don't, just freezing the name, the searchable database by name is not enough. So what we have here is valid concerns that ATF is taking a backdoor approach to creating a federal firearms registry despite congressional intent and the law that says no such registry should be created. So last year we received a response to a letter sent to ATF regarding our concerns surrounding the out-of-business records and a potential gun registry, and in response you said, or the ATF said, the vast majority of the criminal firearms traces completed by ATF NTC are done for state and local law enforcement agencies, as you just said, across the country pursuant to active law enforcement investigations. And the NTC only traces crime guns, and every trace must be identified as such by the requester by selecting an appropriate crime code when submitting the trace request. But it further states that the NTC has no ability to determine the successful prosecution of hundreds of thousands of crime gun traces it completes annually, nor does it have any way to link a trace for a specific prosecution for a particular year. And last week, you wrote back to a further request that said the NTC cannot determine the number of prosecutions resulted from completing crime gun trace requests. So can you tell me what percentage of local law enforcement agencies use the NTC to trace crimes?
So with respect to the percentage that are currently using, which I think I talk to people about trying to increase it. It's free information in active criminal. Right? It's around 50%, give or take.
So if half of the country's local and state law enforcement isn't using the NTC, then what's the purpose of it other than to create an unlawful registry if there's no way to determine that they're contributing to successful prosecutions?
Well, it's because we were asked by, it's over 600 separate times by state and local law enforcement running criminal investigations to trace firearms that local cops, chiefs, sheriffs associated with the crime. And that is important criminal investigative material that we get back to them.
How do you know you don't have that data?
In Highland Park, Illinois, a mass shooter killed 7 people
evidence.
in New York on a subway.
Time's expired.
A mass
Chair recognizes Mr. Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Duddleback, I'd like to give you a chance to finish your answer. I found when I was a federal prosecutor that this kind of information was extremely valuable, especially in tracking down the potential connection between a single gun and multiple.
There's example after example that I've heard, but that the public has heard, about how traces are critical in dealing with violent crime. In Highland Park, Illinois, a mass murderer killed 7 people celebrating the 4th of July in our country. And an urgent trace was conducted on a federal holiday, turned around within hours, which we can't do for all of them, only the urgent traces, because of some of the legal limits we have. And they used that information, our local partners and federal partners, to catch that person before he could kill again. In the subway shooting in Brooklyn, another mass incident, we were able to turn around an urgent trace that led to the capture of the killer. In case after case after case, this is something that local detectives, that local gang task forces ask us to do, and we turn around those investigative leads. That's what they're called. They're called leads in criminal cases, so that we can help to protect people from being hurt again.
Yeah, and I mean, so for example, you might have a gun that's recovered in a shooting. If you use the trace, you can find it maybe was connected to a previous shooting by a different shooter and get that guy off the street when you wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise, right?
Right. There's a NIBIN tool, which is so important. It basically allows us to run a criminal history of a crime gun, so that there might be a shooting over here where there's no evidence, but just down the block a couple weeks ago, there's another murder, or somebody shoots up a stop sign. And on that one, we can connect those two to find out they were fired by the same weapon. And the local police can then say, oh, we don't have evidence on this one, but we have a license plate reader on that guy who shot up the stop sign. So we now we're cooking with gas, right? We've got a lead that we can work on in an active criminal case to try and catch the person. And as I think somebody asked me from the other side of the room, you know, it's important because these people act again many times. And so by interrupting the shooting cycle, we're both holding somebody accountable who hurt or killed somebody, but we're also stopping them from doing it again.
So to go back to some of the previous questions you were just asked about getting violent offenders off the streets, wouldn't this be an extremely valuable tool for doing that? If we want to get people off the streets who've used guns before to actually commit crimes, why wouldn't we want to get as much information as possible to link it to them so we could actually arrest and prosecute them?
And while only 50% of the agencies participate, I have found, at least anecdotally, that those with the highest rates of violent crime understand and use the tracing and NIBIN tool very aggressively to try and solve cases. We help our law enforcement partners clear homicides.
Yeah, and
killings.
50 is better than 0, so I think it makes sense. And
600,000, of course, is better than, that's how many times they asked us individually to trace crime guns just in 2022.
Absolutely. So I know there's, concern on the other side about a firearms registry, and this isn't that. In fact, I believe the GAO found in 2016 that the out-of-business database was totally compliant. So I actually don't think that's an issue either. But I think what is clearly an issue is the violence, gun violence on the street, mass shootings in particular. I want to join in commending the action groups, Moms Against Gun Violence, or Moms Demand Action and the like, for the work that you're doing. Makes a huge difference in the communities. I'm old enough to remember Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and I was in school, and so it was still happening. That I remember I was actually a student prosecutor. You had people driving with the wheel in one hand and a beer in the other